Book Boys.
Book Boys.
Episode 8. 8, I think. Yeah. Probably.
It's January's ending, and we're in the last stretch of the semester.
Yeah.
I feel good about what we've accomplished.
Yeah. I feel like it's been my worst semester of this whole time in university, but it's also been good in a way. It's been a good challenge.
Yeah, it's been good. And wow, this incense is great. Nick lit some incense, and it smells good.
It does smell nice, doesn't it?
Yeah. What is that? What flavor is that?
It's hinoki.
I don't know what that is.
It's like some Japanese wood. I think it's called like cypress, maybe.
Okay. And we got some Hakodate wine with that.
Yeah. So cheers.
Cheers.
So what are we reading today? What are we talking about?
We're talking about Bartleby the Scrivener.
Yeah.
Which is a classic, a cult classic, which we originally picked up because of Slavoj Žižek.
Yeah.
Probably discuss that a bit later in the second half. First of all, what the fuck is a scrivener?
A scrivener is a scribe.
Yeah.
Right.
For like law texts?
I don't know if it's like specifically for law texts, but in this book, it's a Bartleby the Scrivener, A Tale of Wall Street, and Bartleby is a scribe who works for a lawyer. And so it's like copying documents and stuff, right?
It's very mundane work, right?
This book is from 1853, so they didn't have printers back then. Well, actually, I guess they did, but they were pretty expensive. So, if you wanted something copied, you had to pay someone to do it. It's crazy. It's
insane.
crazy how people live, man.
And then the guy would be like, sorry, no, can't do, no, magenta.
You should have a printer that says, I would prefer not to.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's written by Herman Melville, he's the guy that wrote Moby Dick, right?
Yes.
And I think, his... I don't think the book was like particularly well received at the time, but it's definitely become like a cult classic since.
Yeah, it's quite short. You can read it in like 2 hours-ish.
Yeah.
Probably. And it's famous for the phrase... Can you do the voice?
I would prefer not to. So we listened to the audiobook, we should probably say that.
Yeah.
Which is really, really good. The voice acting or whatever you'd say is very good. But yeah, as Phil says, the protagonist, not the protagonist, the antagonist of the book who is Bartleby. He basically causes a bunch of chaos by saying, I prefer not to, when asked to do anything. Yes.
And the protagonist is just this lawyer guy who's like, I'm going to tell you about this guy I knew called Bartleby. Among my scriveners, which are very peculiar people, this guy is even more peculiar, and... Yeah,
he's his strangest hire. And so as you point out, it's written as a confessional in a way, like a kind of diary, or not a diary, but it's written from the first person perspective of the narrator. Yeah. Which is a thing I think would be interesting to discuss as well. So just to go through the plot, as we said, the protagonist is the narrator, and he works as a lawyer on Wall Street. And we have like this cool reference photo of Wall Street. It's a drawing that obviously we can't show, but
we can put it in the bio.
Yeah, we should be able to put photos somewhere. But it's this very like bare looking street with the, I don't know what building that is, but it's a building that still remains in Wall Street today, I think. And there are some guys, and they have like cool hats and walking around, and there's a tree. There's no, at that time in like 1855 when this was drawn, there were no telephone lines, no like, the streets were made of wood, were just like dirt roads. There is a tree, which obviously is not there today in Wall Street in New York. And, there are no, like, there's not the same kind of infrastructure. So it seems like a very, very early Wall Street. And I think around this time, this is when, like, money as a system was, like, relatively new. So, the narrator is unnamed, but he talks about these scribes that he employs and all of their kind of peculiarities. And like Phil says, Bartleby is the strangest one of them all. And he starts off as a new hire, Bartleby, in the Scrivener's office. And at the beginning, he's like a very productive worker.
Yeah.
But one day, something changes, and when he's told to do something, he replies with, "I would prefer not to." And this kind of throws the narrator off massively. And from that point onwards, Bartleby starts doing less and less and less, to the point where he's just sitting in his office staring out the window at like a brick wall.
And he also starts like living there, basically.
Yes, he also starts living there. And this causes chaos in the mind of the narrator, who he like flip-flops between desiring to be a charitable person and resenting the fact that Bartleby is taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
But Bartleby is never described as like a malicious person. He's never really described at all.
Yeah, he doesn't talk a lot.
No.
And
he's even described as like kind of having sort of ghostly features and not really appearing human. And the way that he says "I would prefer not to" is never like said in an aggressive way or an exhausted way, or never conveyed with an emotion that would suggest any underlying like reason for not wanting to do anything.
Yeah, and in fact the narrator says that because Bartleby is so mild-mannered and gentle about the way he says it, he feels like he can't get angry for some reason. Like,
yeah.
If someone was just outright like, "Fuck you, I'm not doing your job," whatever, then you could be more angry as an employer. But since he's just like, "Yeah, I would prefer not to do that." And it's like, okay.
It's the Sigma mindset. So the narrator tries a couple of different ways of getting rid of Bartleby. The first main one is he offers him. He basically says like, "You have a week to find a new job, and I'll assist you any way that you want. I'll give you some money to like help you on, and you have a week from now to do that." And the end of the week comes, and he's still in the office.
Yeah.
And then finally, like the narrator, out of feeling he can't do anything else, he decides to move his office to another building, and at that point he's like, "Goodbye, Bartleby. Like, I wish you the best in the future."
Yeah.
And then Bartleby remains in that building, the former building, and the narrator comes back, and because he's like prompted by the landlord there, and wants to get rid of this Bartleby guy. So Bartleby is remaining in this building, and causing a nuisance to these new tenants. And then eventually the landlord gets Bartleby arrested, and he gets sent to this place called the Tombs, which is like a prison in New York. And it's a weird looking building. I'll have to show you a photo later. It looks like, I don't know, some kind of like, it's kind of brutalist, I guess. Like some kind of like very faceless sort of dystopian looking building.
It is a prison, so...
Yeah. But it doesn't have any of the, I don't know, it's not a traditional like looking building by any means. So Bartleby's now in prison. The narrator goes and visits him, and in a kind of last ditch attempt to accommodate him, he bribes the cook in the prison to give him preferential treatment. Yeah. But then when the narrator returns a few days later, he finds that Bartleby is dead because he has refused to eat. And that's basically where the story ends. There's a little bit of discourse after. Yeah. So, yeah. How did you find it?
Yeah, puzzling, but quite interesting.
Puzzling is a good word.
Yeah.
It's a very, very simple book.
It is.
Like, incredibly simple.
It's like, here's one premise, we're just going to stick with that and explore that idea.
Yeah. And I think, the fact that the story is so centered on the narrator and rarely involves the input of other characters. And the fact that the narrator is the main decision maker in the book, we get to explore that relationship very closely, rather than, for example, there's a section in the book where the other Scriveners, they overhear Bartleby saying that he'd prefer not to, and they start criticizing him for that.
Right.
But it's not their story, and it's the way that the narrator deals with it. So, we learn a lot about the narrator as a character, and I think one of the things that stood out to me most is this it feels like a very Christian charity kind of thing. The narrator, as I said before, he flip-flops between resentment and desiring to take care of Bartleby, and it's almost like he sublimates resentment for charity. And one of the really helpful things about the first person narration is you go through his thought process, and he's I find this guy so bothersome, but he must be in such a bad situation that he's living in my office now, this poor man. I must take care of him, even if I get nothing from him. I will make it my mission to do this. And then, slowly, eventually he collapses again, and he's out of frustration and resentment.
Yeah, it's quite, he goes out of his way so much as to move offices rather than, kick Bartleby out forcefully, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's another theme, I think, civility, or being civil with other people, and trying to avoid confrontation by acting civil, which causes a lot of problems as well. He doesn't even call the police.
Yeah. Oh, did we mention how Bartleby ends up in prison?
No. He was just becoming a nuisance, no?
Yeah, well, he moved offices, but then people started... I think people, other people who use the same building in his own office, started contacting him, there's this weird guy here and he won't leave. You're the last one who, spoke to him. Do something about it. And I think then when he goes to look, the police are already dragging him out or something. Yeah.
It's because the landlord called the police on him. Yeah, I think. I guess we can also look at it from Bartleby's perspective as well. I was reading a little bit about this, and I think obviously one of the most obvious interpretations of Bartleby is that he's just really fucking depressed. But it's not. I don't think that's really the way that we should really think of Bartleby.
No.
He's more of a curse or a ghost, and
he rejects the idea of participation.
Yeah.
He's quite disillusioned with the world presented in front of him for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a way, he's rebelling against the order that is. It's kind of silent protesting is the most effective way of protesting in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if he just stood up and be fuck you, your law. I don't want to work for you.
Yeah,
I want to do this shit.
But yeah, for sure. But the thing is, it's not a revolution in pursuit of anything really, because he doesn't say I would prefer not to with any particular goal. Yeah,
at least see, that's the thing. He's not really much of a character, right? He's more of an idea.
Yeah.
We don't really know anything about. There's nothing really that makes him human at all. So, yeah, I don't think the book would work from a first person perspective from Bartleby, simply because if Bartleby had different thoughts than simply I would prefer not to, he would stop being Bartleby.
Definitely. Yeah, we don't want to know what Bartleby's thinking, and we have to assume that we have to feel that he's not really thinking anything.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's the same, rationalizing dying from starvation. It's like it wouldn't work from that perspective. So, but on the other hand, the narrator obviously writes very much like he'd like to be perceived. Like the way that the his descriptions of like feeling like he wants to be charitable towards Bartleby is like kind of self-ingratiating in a way. Like it's as if he feels like someone's going to read it and someone's going to kind of think highly of the narrator for feeling such a way.
Right.
Yeah, and this idea as well of like Bartleby is a nuisance in several ways. Firstly, he doesn't do the jobs that he's employed to do. Or he doesn't do the jobs that he's asked to do. Secondly, he's employed and not doing anything. Thirdly, he's like kind of giving the narrator a questionable reputation amongst his peers, right? That's like described as like one of the reasons that the narrator decides to leave the offices is because people are starting to talk.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about Scrooge when I was reading this as well, because like Scrooge and the narrator are so different, but they both engage in some kind of charity. And like I think like Scrooge would never feel this flip flop between resentment and like charity.
Right.
It would just be like
there's one transformation in the book, and that's kind of it. Right?
Yeah, and he wouldn't really question a character like Bartleby, maybe, or at least that wouldn't be the point of his character. But the narrator's, I guess, a bit more realistic, maybe.
Well, I guess another idea is how do you help someone like Bartleby who's so completely disillusioned with the world and like basically already has given up and it's just manifesting in stages now. Because when we meet Bartleby, at first he's a productive worker, but he already is like never talks, and he like if the lawyer guy asks him like, oh, can you get those papers from the other desk? He's like, I prefer not to.
Yeah.
And it's like he's not rebelling against everything at this point, but he's pretty much already decided on that course. So how do you help someone like that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's
in a way he is kind of complete nihilism, no? But in a different way than everything is meaningless, I'm so depressed, nothing matters, I'm so depressed, but more just like already resigned to this idea of it's kind of oh god, don't question me about my Greeks. Is it Aristotle? The idea that the basic idea of life is just we're just inching closer to death, and that's kind of everything we experience as growth really just is us moving one step closer to dying. And it feels like Bartleby is kind of accepted that and is like, all right, so I'm just gonna minimize stress and exhaustion and like unnecessary feelings and just move it along, move this process along.
It's interesting because my feelings about Bartleby is that he's much more supernatural than like and not like I don't know, like when I was reading the book or like listening to the audiobook, I wasn't thinking of Bartleby as like a character who is influenced by like, for example, in the end of the book, the narrator's like, oh, I heard a rumor that he worked in a dead letter house, which is like some really, really dead end, like menial, boring ass job.
Yeah, they throw away letters that didn't get delivered, right?
Yeah. And you have to sort them before they're thrown away and stuff. And so he was like, maybe that was the reason why he was so dejected. But I feel almost as if that is kind of not the point of Bartleby. And Bartleby is, because Bartleby wouldn't, in a way, I think he wouldn't respond to being understood like that. So maybe you could say that is the ultimate nihilism thing, but like, he isn't. I don't see him as like a character who was like affected by something in his life that made him like that.
Right.
But more as like not even a real person, not even like, or something, not even something that you can humanize or try to explain, and rather like just a kind of force of this, like, I would prefer not to, rejection.
Yeah.
That is supposed to illuminate the character of the narrator, and I guess the world that they live in as well. It's like what would happen, almost in the same way as like the Underground Man, like not necessarily like, not something you can necessarily explain by like, oh, he had this experience, or like he had such a bad childhood, this is why he's behaving this way, but more that that's not important. The most important thing is that it's a character, and like this is supposed to explore this idea. And that's another reason why I think explaining Bartleby as depressed doesn't really do the story justice, or at least it's like, yeah, sure, he's like, if he were a real person, you would probably explain it as him being depressed. But that's not really the point of this book.
I see.
I think. So yeah. That's kind of how I feel about that.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that it's the story is located in Wall Street. I don't know if it had the same connotations at the time of like, fast moving progress and capitalism and money and finance and so on. But I mean, it's like Occupy Wall Street, right? If there's like, if you want to like make a character that is disillusioned with the order that is, that's pretty much the place where you would maybe put him, right?
Yeah, I think so. And the idea of him looking out the window at a brick wall is cool, because it is like, buildings are being built so quickly that the ones that have had windows built in them are already having buildings built in front of them. That suggests one thing, but then it's like this whole meaningless of like these things that we have around us, and it's like looking out the window is just looking at a brick wall.
Right.
This is cool. I like that.
Let me take an approach that I don't that I don't agree with at all, but that I will use to throw at you, maybe, so that we can learn something.
Sure.
I guess I'm playing devil's advocate is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
So let's say Bartleby is an example of a poor laborer in the capitalist system who has been alienated according to Marx's alienation of labor theory, and the meaningless division of labor task he has been given all his life.
Yeah.
Have dehumanized him to the point that he is just this kind of spirit of, I don't want to anymore.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you want to prevent more Bartlebys from appearing, we need the revolution and so on. Bartleby is a socialist hero.
Bartleby, I would say he's not a socialist hero, and the reason why is that his I would prefer not to is revolutionary in its own way, right? That's the first thing. In that sense it is, right? He's saying like, I refuse to participate in this ideology, I refuse to participate in this system, and really the fact that it causes so much chaos reveals this instability, I guess. If this were a real book, if this were a real situation, like shut up. If this was a real story, obviously Bartleby would just be replaced by some other random person. But we won't get into that. But there is some potential there, but that's not what Bartleby does. Bartleby like kills himself essentially. He wills himself into death by just not doing anything, and that is like quite different, I think. You know, there's a refusal to participate in a system and then creating something new, and then, you know, creating something new out of the chaos that you create through not participating. And then there is the, you know, refusing to do anything to the point that you just die. So I don't think Bartleby is. Bartleby can definitely be an inspiration in that sense, and I think that is like one of the most interesting parts of this book is that, like, you know, what if you just say I won't do this? Like, we have, like, you know, I think a lot of us we are brought up with, you know, whether it's through our experiences of school or in like family systems about authority, and you know, most people, I guess, don't really test the limit of what is like not acceptable, but like they don't really test the limit of how much you can refuse to do when something is asked of you. And so, you know, in an environment like this, which is like, you know, it's pretty high stakes, I guess. You know, this guy's working on Wall Street. Like, it's not just some random place. It's, you know, it's a hugely, very quickly expanding, very wealthy, like a lot of money goes through this place.
But the Scriveners are described as very poor people.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the Scriveners themselves are wealthy, but you know, the stakes are high in this place, I guess, and especially for the lawyers, right? So, you know, this is something that I mentioned to you earlier, but I didn't go into detail about it. I wanted to save it for the podcast, but as you mentioned, Slavoj Žižek is the reason that we got introduced to this book. And there are two kind of things that he talks about in relation to this. And the second one, which we haven't discussed before, is this like same thing of like this no as a revolutionary act, or like not participating. And I think he talks about it in the Parallax View. I read a little bit of an extract from that earlier, but there was a 2007 article from The Guardian, which was titled something like "You Shouldn't Bother Voting," or something like that. And, you know, kind of classic Zizek style, like being what's the word, like edgy, and contrarian, and like, you know, it's a good thought experiment, I guess. But his, you know, main idea was, well, actually I have a quote here, I'll read it. So he's talking about, like, you know, political systems and voting, and, you know, the idea of things not changing through representational democracy and stuff. So he says here, the solution, we should reinvent, quote, Bartleby politics, after the famous clerk from Herman Melville's short story, who answers all his boss's orders, I would prefer not to. The threat today is not passivity, but pseudo-activity. The urge to, quote, be active and to, quote, participate, to mask the nothingness of what goes on. The truly difficult thing is to step back, to withdraw from it. Those in power often prefer even a critical participation, a dialogue, to silence anything. Those in power often prefer even a critical participation, a dialogue, to silence. Anything to break our ominous passivity. Only such a withdrawal will create a space for really doing something. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an elaboration of this idea of pseudo-activity, right? You know, the idea that, as it says, the people in power are really kind of the system, so to speak, invents all these menial tasks which appear to be revolutionary, but really are just a way to satisfy the revolutionary urge while still legitimizing the system. And so an example in like Zizek fashion would be Like, oh, if you buy a coffee at Starbucks, then 10% goes to like some children in Africa or something.
Yeah.
Which is according to this idea of pseudo action would be, you're still participating in the system, which in this case is to say capitalism exploits these children and so on. And this 10% of the coffee doesn't really help anything, and it's just a way for you as a participator in the system, which that's vital for the system to exist, is that people participate, so you can feel good about revolting against the system. You're doing something good. You're opposing the system, but at the same time, it doesn't change anything, and it just legitimizes the whole thing.
Yeah.
Which, well, okay, there's obviously a kernel of truth to the idea of pseudo-action. I just think it's really dangerous to take it too far. And so in the infamous we've had a disagreement about this, but in the infamous Peterson versus Zizek debate, and Zizek comes after Peterson for the whole clean your room idea, which is to say that clean your room, self-improvement, all these things, turn your life around, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, whatever, they're just pseudo-actions. They're just excuses for basically make the individual responsible for their own success or failure, therefore ignoring the grander problems in the system, which can only be solved, according to Zizek, collectively. Okay, how do we come back to Bartleby now? Bartleby, I think. Okay,
I forgot we were talking about that.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you a question then. If the revolution knocked on Bartleby's door and was like, the revolution's here, we're tearing down the system, no more Wall Street, no more law office, no more menial tasks, are you with us? Would Bartleby say yes, or would he say, I prefer not to?
That's a good question.
Right? Because Bartleby is rebelling, in a sense.
Yeah.
But would he be interested in a kind of active rebellion if it was there? Or is he really just this very personification of the idea of inaction?
Yeah. So, well, bringing it back to I'll answer by mentioning this voting thing.
Yeah.
Because pseudo action. Okay, so the I would prefer not to, leading you to not vote, is a thing, but then also, like, when people make it a mission to not vote, that's also a kind of pseudo action in itself, because it's like,
right,
if I don't vote, then it's like I'm easing my conscience about perpetuating this system, maybe, or and obviously in that sense, nothing will happen. So
yeah, I guess not voting is kind of an active. But that is the kind of the Zizek idea of I would prefer not to, which Zizek takes this idea and he connects this to his idea of ideology, which is to say, the reason why he made that his slogan is, as you mentioned earlier as well, I would prefer not to is not a negation of the predicate of the action in the verb, which is, it's not to say I don't want to. To say I would prefer not to is an affirmation of a negative predicate, right? So, and in the same way, not voting would be. I know. I guess
it's hard to say. I'm trying to pull wine at the same time.
Wine. Okay, so not voting would be a negation of the predicate, right?
Yeah.
You would have to do something like anti-voting,
Yeah, sure.
For it to be in true Zizek Bartleby fashion.
Yeah.
I guess to explain this a bit.
This is like saying he uses an example of the undead. So what is it? To not be dead is to be living, as like we are now. But to be undead is to be something completely different. It's like a third option, right?
Yeah, it has something spiritual, ghostly about it. Different connotations, and
so to unvote is the real thing. It's not to not vote, which would be falling into the same trap. But it's to somehow unvote, whatever that could mean.
But, so I totally get this idea that Zizek is trying to make, and I do think that, by taking this phrase, I would prefer not to. He does elaborate his point well, but I think it's quite different from the intention of the book, because in the book, really, Bartleby is this kind of completely resigned idea of an action, where he's saying, I would prefer not to, not I won't do. But he also isn't like triumphantly saying, I'm going to undo,
Yeah.
The Zizek thing would be to say, I'm going to undo. It would be in a way a rebellion.
Well, exactly, because and that is the main difference. Like Bartleby wouldn't be like, I'm going to undo my life.
Yeah. I don't think
he would be interested in doing that.
Yeah, he wouldn't be interested in disrupting the law offices actively, right?
Yeah.
But then again, Zizek would say that would be a pseudo action, a kind of act, because active protest is a pseudo action.
Yeah.
In Zizek's eyes, I think.
Yeah.
Interesting story that happened a couple of weeks ago. So Greta Thunberg was arrested in Germany for the first time. She got arrested.
Right. Yeah.
At this coal mine. But later, video footage was leaked. So, and it's just. So she's there with the police, and they're like posing for the arrest picture.
Yeah.
All the police, they're like taking selfies with her, and then they're like holding her in front of the camera so the journalist can take a picture for the newspaper, and then they just walk away like laughing and chatting, which is so. It is kind of the best illustration for, this kind of active protest against climate, blah blah. It really is a pseudo action, and in that, that it does feel like that.
Well, like, I mean, in that instance, it's like this. There is there's utility to like presenting it in that way. I think there was like a similar thing where AOC got arrested, and she was like walking, pretending that she was like handcuffed. Like with her hands behind her back, but that she wasn't actually handcuffed, obviously. And there was like a big stink over it. And but I mean, if you're an activist, that's like part of the course, right? You wanna, because it's all about how you look. Like a lot, people will like make themselves like as stiff and difficult to carry as possible, so they have to get as many police to like come and collect them. They'll do things that look outrageous even if they don't necessarily cause damage, like the whole like the tomato soup like protest things in art museums.
There
are lots of different strategies.
Okay, I want to return to an earlier question. So I asked, how would you help someone like Bartleby? And you basically told me that we shouldn't look at Bartleby as a nihilistic person, as a depressed person, but more as an idea, which is supposed to illustrate the world around him, or
good memory.
For the reader. But let's suppose for a second that there is someone behaving like Bartleby.
Yeah.
Or we can also tackle it from the macro perspective and say, how do we prevent this idea? Or how do you, yeah.
How do you prevent Bartleby?
How do you prevent Bartleby? Yeah. Or how do you fix Bartleby if it's already there?
Sure. How do you fix Bartleby? Okay, there's a couple of things I think.
Okay. Would the communist utopia in which we all eat chocolate and draw pictures prevent Bartleby because there's no labor, which is boring and so on?
Or no coercion?
Yeah.
Okay, we have to assume that Bartleby is real. I don't think so. But I think maybe okay, we have... I feel like it revolves a lot around like authority and how authority is responded to, or how like... how this dynamic between someone ordering and someone being directed like works. So the reason that Bartleby continues to like cause havoc in the workplace is not, like you said earlier, not because he's like, no, fuck you, like I'm not doing this, but because he does this like moral suasion thing. He uses like the word prefer is like really quite significant, I think, because it's like, it's not like I won't do that. Even I won't do that is like,
it's too active, right?
And too strong. But like I would prefer is like, firstly it introduces this idea that you have any choice.
Yeah.
Which if you say I won't, it's like, no, I reject completely this order that you've given me, and this is something new. But preferring is like, I'm very, very discreetly telling you that there are different possible ways of doing this.
There are two or three things, and I have a preference for this thing.
Exactly,
which is not the one that you suggested.
And prefer as well, within the context of this book, which is, the writing is very colourful. It has this like it invokes this idea of a society where everyone's like, oh, good day, my friend.
Yeah. And
like being very civil and nice with each other. And using the word prefer is like a real appeal to this kind of like moral sentiment, I think. And especially this idea of like charity, or Christian charity, maybe like it's like, oh, this guy would prefer not to, then we should make considerations for him. And that's the thing. I think if you were like, this is the reason I don't think Bartleby is like, should really be described as nihilistic or even depressed, is that maybe nihilist is a bit more appropriate, but like in that situation, it's like if you were really pushed into doing something, you would react much more strongly. You would be like, no, I really don't want to do that. I said I would prefer not to. I was being nice in the beginning, but I really don't want to do this. And that would be something you could work with, right? From then on, you would be like, okay, what is wrong? Like, why did you respond so aggressively then? Like, is there something I can help you with? And that's like the reason why the description of Bartleby is so important. When he says, I would prefer not to, the narrator mentions or makes it clear that there's no like hint of any emotion in his voice. And what we'd be dealing with is not so much like, someone being lazy, but rather someone who doesn't like subscribe to, I don't know, these like formalities, the way that we interact with each other, and also doesn't feel like really.
Yeah, I was thinking if there was an emotion or experience which could wake Bartleby up from his disillusionment of the world, what would it be? Like pain, fear, pleasure, beauty, awe. terror.
So, Bartleby, I definitely don't think pain would be a thing. Like, I thought about the idea of, like, you know, what if you just gave Bartleby a big slap? Or, like, what if the narrator just, like, laid into him out of frustration?
Yeah.
But I can totally just imagine him receiving it and not doing anything.
Right.
I don't think pain would be. But you know, Bartleby he's not defined by like any kind of action, so it's like I can't really imagine him, you know, actively engaging with like a beautiful landscape, like actually looking at it and like breathing it in.
Yeah, he would just.
His eyes would glaze over.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so beauty wouldn't work.
Pain wouldn't work.
work.
Fear possibly, or like. You know, one thing the narrator never does is he never like. Really forcefully, you know, puts his authority down.
Yeah.
He never shouts at him. He's always like making special considerations for Bartleby or like making compromises for Bartleby. And he does express his frustration towards him, but he never like, I don't think he ever really properly like raises his voice at him. I don't know how that would work. My feeling is like if someone were to act like that in real life, you know, shouting at them would probably get them to respond. You know, that's kind of generally how like authorities deal with.
There's one example in the book where he asks Bartleby, he calls him, he's like, Bartleby, no response.
Oh yeah.
Bartleby, no response. And then he like yells, Bartleby! And the guy's like, he like walks over to him slowly and is like,
that's true, yeah.
Yeah, what?
That's true.
Okay, following scenario. And maybe this would even be toward the end of the book, where Bartleby is almost completely given up. Or where he has completely given up. You ask Bartleby to, I don't know, pick up a pencil. And he gives his usual response. And then you bring up his mum and you hold a gun to her head. And
assuming that he has a mum.
Yeah.
You don't actually even know that.
And you're like, Bartleby, pick up the pencil or I will shoot your mum right now. What would Bartleby do?
I don't think he would do anything.
Yeah, would he say I would prefer not to?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Is he that far gone?
But yeah, I mean, I was thinking, like, what if you asked Bartleby to breathe? Like, what would happen then? He would probably just be like, nah, I'm good, I prefer not to, and then just die.
But then he would be altering his course.
No, he wouldn't, though.
Because he's already breathing.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that would, like...
I don't think you could trick him that easily.
I don't know. We don't have a scenario in the book like that.
Yeah, because then you could just be like, Bartleby,
don't do work.
Don't pick up the pencil. Like he's not the lion from Nietzsche.
Right. Yeah.
He's not Nietzsche's lion, which just says no to everything, right?
Yeah.
He's not. Yeah. He's not an active rebellious spirit.
Yeah.
It's just he's set on this idea of this path of just gradually doing nothing and yeah.
Yeah, maybe then he would just not respond if you told him to breathe.
And also so the original reason why he stopped doing work is because his eyesight got really bad after he was like copying documents in the dark, and his eyes got really bad. It was described as like they're like a white glaze or something.
Right.
He like goes close to blind. And then he's like, well, I can't do work anymore, so I would just prefer not to do anything. Is that not a nudge towards Bartleby as a socialist hero against alienation of labor?
How do you mean?
Like the reason why he gave up on work is because literally the system broke him.
On that specific job, at
yeah,
least.
yeah.
I mean, I guess so. If I understand what you're saying correctly, like...
Yeah, but he was already rejecting shit before that, so...
Yeah, but if we were to take that as an isolated example...
So, yeah, it's not like he was transformed from that experience.
Yeah. It's not as clear as that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe let's revisit Zizek.
Yeah, let's do it. We had another thing to talk about, didn't we? Zizek.
Yeah, so on the note of... We can explore this idea of exploring... We can explore the idea of affirming a negative instead of negating a predicate.
Yeah.
So Zizek brings up the example of this... what is it? It's like a scene in some novel, I think, where the waiter asks them like...
Oh, it's a joke of his, the coffee without cream.
Yeah.
I don't think it's bait. No, it might be, I don't know, but...
It's like the waiter asks him, do you have a coffee without cream? Or can I have a coffee without cream? And the waiter's like, sorry, we only have coffee without milk.
Yeah. There's a similar joke as well where he's like, some guy goes to a supermarket and he's like, is this a supermarket without butter? And he said, the person at the shop says, no, we're not the supermarket without butter. We're the supermarket without oil. The supermarket without butter is over there.
Yeah, which is kind of a socialist joke, like...
Right, yeah.
Because he's from
he's
from, I think, what is it, Yugoslavia?
Slovenia,
whatever. Same shit. And, they didn't have... The stores didn't have products. Right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Explains the socialist joke.
Yeah. So, is that really the same as the idea of I would prefer not to, or have we done quite a jump here now? Because this ties into a different Zizek idea, which is, if you have something and you take it away and then you put it back, or the opposite way around, if you have nothing and you put it there and you take it away again, you don't have zero. You have 0 plus alpha.
What does plus alpha mean?
It's the whole Marxist like surplus value. Surplus.
Oh, okay.
You have some kind of surplus.
Yeah.
So he likes to talk about this scene from a movie where the woman invites some guy who she has been on a date on. At the end of the night, she invites him to her apartment, saying, "Would you like to come in for a coffee?" And he says, "Well, unfortunately, I don't drink coffee." And she says, "I don't have any."
Yeah.
Which is a very direct erotic invitation, right? So basically,
and she's like, "Can you imagine a more erotic gesture?"
Yeah.
Like, please don't say the word erotic.
Yeah. Trying not to come.
Don't come.
Yeah. No, but that illustrates the idea quite well, right? You have nothing, then you introduce the idea of coffee, and then you negate the coffee, but what you have is not nothing. What you have is a very erotic invitation.
Yeah.
Which is, according to Zizek, the way that ideology works within our language. So, can we still apply this to Bartleby, or is this now a different topic? It feels a bit different to me. So where exactly did we make the jump? Because we're still negating with the coffee. We're still negating the coffee. But it's not as if to say, would you like to come in for a coffee? And it's like, I would prefer not to.
Okay.
Like,
I'm confused now.
Two different things.
I'm confused.
Okay, so I think Zizek likes to throw these together when he talks, which he just brings up a bunch of different ideas all at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think they're two quite different things. So the one idea is something which is negated, or starting out from a point of nothing, introducing something, taking it away, doesn't leave us with nothing, it leaves us with nothing plus alpha.
Right, okay. Yeah.
That is a different idea than the idea of affirming a negative instead of negating a predicate.
Okay, I think I see what you're saying. In the case of... Yeah, okay, yeah. So, the supermarket example, or like the coffee example is like, coffee without cream is different to coffee without milk. We can think of them as different things. Or, you know, the supermarket without oil is like a kind of third thing. Yeah, in the case of Bartleby, it's I just had it. It's just like, you know, when you have an experience and you like you touch the ceiling of your IQ and you're like, fuck, it's not going higher than that.
Yeah.
But with Bartleby, it's like he's not creating anything new. He kind of is just saying no, I think. I don't think he is like... I think this... Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe we can think about this a bit more, but...
Go on.
The I prefer not to is mostly significant in this... In like the social sense, I guess. Like, using... These words are... They're not creating like this new like third thing, but rather the reason that I would prefer not to is because it's a perfectly like formed statement to appeal to the moral like sensibilities of the person you're speaking to, or the sense of charity of the person you're speaking to. But essentially saying, I won't do this. It's a way of like defying authority when your authority is not just a tyrant, like, you know, some tyrannical authority. Yeah, I don't think it's like, and that's, you know, going back to this whole thing about Bartleby as a revolutionary. Bartleby as a revolutionary would be producing this third thing, like this, you know, this not having coffee, meaning like sex or whatever, or like, yeah, not coffee without cream being qualitatively different from coffee without milk, but he's not doing that. Bartleby is saying no until he dies, basically, right? That's the extent of his like action.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. If you imagine this novel just came out in 1853, whatever, and you read it, and you're like, so what? There's this guy, Bartleby, he's being a complete ass, and he died. Good for him. Like, why do we need to care about people like Bartleby? Or why does this matter at all? Because the world keeps spinning.
Yeah, that it does. I don't think we need to care about Bartleby necessarily. I think one of like the plainest interpretations you could have of this book is that there is no room for compromise on your morals if you are a capitalist or an employer or in that kind of situation. And to do so would be deceitful to the people that you're dealing with and to yourself. Like the lesson that I get from this, or like what I feel this is pointing to most strongly, is this idea that there is this unresolvable, and I think it's kind of Marxist in a way, like this unresolvable conflict between an employer and employee. And in attempting to, introduce morals into this, or introduce some kind of charity or some kind of goodwill, you don't actually solve anything. And more than anything, not even about solving things, but you're not being genuine in that activity, because you're like, you have your reputation, you have your business that you need to run, you've got your other employees to keep happy, you've got your clients to keep happy, you've got all these incentives to push you in a certain direction.
But on the other side of that, we have Scrooge, who turns around and then helps his pays for the whatever medical bill for his employee's child, not because he wants to keep him as a laborer, but
yes,
because we introduced morals into the relationship.
Yeah. Maybe then it's not the fact that it's incompatible, but I mean, the difference is that Scrooge goes through like a supernatural transformation, and the narrator has this dropped on his desk, like he has this dropped in front of him.
But I think the point is that you can't help Bartleby. It's impossible to help him.
Yeah,
and
of course.
The narrator tries to help him. It's not like the lesson is, because there is this unresolved conflict between capital and labor, a capitalist can't really help the laborer because he needs the labor, and it's a business relationship.
It's not that he can't help, but it's rather that this like differing incentives and showing help would always be deceitful, so long as you're motivated by the incentives that are around you and that are part of your business, right?
But even if we assume that this guy, the lawyer in Bartleby's story, even if we assume that he completely gave up on his career, didn't care about anything else in the world except helping Bartleby, the story would still end the same, I'm pretty sure. Bartleby would probably stop eating in his law office and die there.
Yeah, sure.
So I get what you're saying, but I don't think it matters that there is a conflict between capital and labor per se. Because there is no helping Bartleby.
Yeah, fair enough. But that's if we're talking about helping Bartleby, I think. But if I don't know. Obviously, Bartleby is not like he's not a laborer in the same sense as like, or at least he's not a real character. I don't think. But I mean, as insofar as it reflects, the narrator's motivations, who assumes that Bartleby is a real person, and assumes that Bartleby is someone that can be helped, it reveals the fact that not so much about actually helping Bartleby, but rather about the intentions of someone who holds authority over another person. And, in like a Christmas story, what is it?
Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol. So Scrooge does help. His is a scribe as well, right?
Yeah, I think so.
He is, yeah. Helps his scribe pays for his little Timmy's fortnight pass or whatever. I can't remember.
Fortnight battle pass.
But the even though that's nice and optimistic, it is still true that like it operates within this like balance of power, which you can't. You cannot like flip. Like little Timmy and his dad and his family will always be underneath Scrooge.
Yeah.
In that relationship, and the only way of subverting that is just by being like, no, I'm not doing this. What else do we have?
I had something.
Yeah. Something I wanted to bring up.
Yes.
Okay, so similarly. Oh no, one on the sofa. Shit. Bartleby is. Again, this is not thinking of Bartleby as a real person, but thinking of him as like a way of reflecting on the structure that he exists within. In a similar way to Gregor Samsa in the Metamorphosis, his value is contingent on, like, maybe not his value, maybe that's the wrong word, but the crisis of this book and the crisis of Metamorphosis is created by the fact that neither of them can do their job. And obviously they diverge, like the ways the characters. Gregor is much more. He's an active character.
No, but they're really similar in the way
they are. Yeah.
Yeah. True.
They both also die of starvation.
Yeah, because they're resigned to basically do anything, right?
It is different, definitely.
Yeah.
Gregor Samsa kills himself because he's like, I don't want to bother my family, and Gregor Samsa is resented by his family much more strongly than the narrator resents Bartleby, I think.
Yeah.
But there are weird parallels there. I was reading. I was trying to do a little bit of research on, like, whether it would have inspired Metamorphosis, but apparently Melville was basically forgotten during Kafka's life, so we wouldn't have actually. It was quite unlikely if he actually had any exposure.
Right. No, that is a very interesting parallel.
So let's think about it. We have Gregor Samsa wakes up and he's a big bug, ginormous bug. He can't even get out of bed. And so immediately, the very same morning, his employer comes over because he hasn't got to work on time, and his family are all up in arms. Everyone is like super stressed out because he won't come out of his bedroom, and then obviously we find out he's a bug, and everyone's like losing their shit, and because of that, everyone's life needs to change. He goes from being this like employee of the month salesman to his father having to come out of retirement and go back into work. His having to take in guests, his sister and his mum having to basically be like housemaids for the tenants.
Yeah.
And but this is not like a Gregor Samsa is like physically incapable of being useful.
Yeah.
And he's also like a social, like a monster. Like he's completely socially unacceptable. It's just the way like he looks, right? But Bartleby is kind of different because firstly, we're not dealing with a family environment, and people don't hate him nearly as much as they hate or find Gregor Samsa just vile.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, a similar kind of thing going on, I guess.
Complete resignation, which ends in their own starvation. Yeah, that's a good parallel. I don't know what to make of it though.
Yeah.
Okay, we haven't talked much about the three other clerks in the story, which they make up quite a bit of the story.
Yeah.
There's, I forgot their names. I remember Ginger Nut, which is the small guy.
There's Turkey.
Turkey is the old guy, and then I forgot the other one. But so the thing, so Turkey basically gets unbearable in the afternoon. He's this old guy who, in the afternoon, he just gets like really active and fidgety, and he messes everything up.
Yeah.
And he's basically useless. And the other guy is basically useless in the morning. He's really like just angry. He kind of reminds me of the character Mike from Office Space. Is it Mike? I can't remember. But he's like really kind of angry, and
is that the protagonist
in the movie?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
It's the like white guy who listens to rap in his car.
That is the main guy, no?
No. Whatever. Anyway, yeah. So the other guy is useless in the mornings, but then comes to his senses in the evening. So basically, we have these laborers who complete themselves in a system together, even though they're flawed as individuals.
Right. Okay.
They have their problems, but somehow they balance each other out. Whereas Bartleby also is problematic, but he, like, everyone hates him immediately because he just does not cooperate at all, ever. And so I get, there's this idea of like imperfect humans completing each other in the system.
Yeah.
Versus the rejection to participate in the system, right?
There's that word like complementary inadequacies or something. Complementary deficiencies. Yeah, and I mean, well, Bartleby's flaw is that he's a good worker in the beginning, but then he's not consistent. In a way, it's like whereas Ginger Nut and Turkey flip-flop between each other, like in terms of they complement each other.
Yeah.
There's no one to complement. Bartleby's like he's really good at the beginning, and then he fucking doesn't do anything. And there shouldn't be either, because that's a good point.
Okay. I was gonna say one lesson maybe that this is certainly not the mainstream interpretation of the book, but you mentioned earlier the idea of how much non-participation can you get away with.
Right, yeah.
And I was thinking of like, because we're living in Japan, and I was thinking of I was thinking of kind of the Japanese corporate or even like institutional environment, where a lot of people feel like or claim they are forced into doing things out of obligation, which they're technically not forced to, but it's whatever. It's the social pressure, it's the expectations.
I think a lot of people will be familiar with like the going to, not leaving work before your boss leaves, for example, or like always having to go to the company like drinking parties after work. Like, those are quite familiar abroad, I think. Yeah.
So I guess if you're just politely being a little Bartleby, and it's like if you're just politely saying I prefer not to. Doesn't that resolve a lot of the like so-called peer pressure?
So not without I was really wanted to talk about Japan in relation to this book because I think it's quite applicable. There are I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know you haven't really said like given a specific stance, but like in a situation like this, like how much do you really want to, when it comes to like the corporate environment in Japan, people offer so much of their time and their life and their energy to these like supposedly mandatory social things, or like workplace obligations or these extra jobs that they don't necessarily need to do. And it's infuriating because it just feels like why don't you just say no? Like, why don't you just like put your foot down? And I think, I mean, one of the reasons, I do think there are social consequences for it that prevent people from doing it, because there is an expectation that everyone will be involved. And like, I've spoken to my girlfriend about this a lot, because she often has to go to like yesterday, she had a day off, but she's part of the company union, right? And one of the activities that they did, they went to an orphanage and they like played with kids for like a couple hours. I mean, that's cool. It sounds kind of fun actually, but she was like dreading it because it's like a day off and it's like
fucking orphans. Ugh.
Gotta play with orphans on my day off. But like, this is such a bad example because this is actually like quite a nice thing to do. You know, a more appropriate example is just like, you know, sometimes she has to work until like 10 or 11 p.m. Because she has fucking like union meetings or whatever. Or,
isn't it hilarious how the unions don't help the worker at all? Just
unions in Japan are fucked.
Fuck unions. Okay, go on, sorry.
They... Fuck unions.
Screwy speaking. Fuck unions. God.
So, I'm lost now.
Yeah, sorry. Unions. I need to get this. Unions are the embodiment.
No,
of
we're not doing
action.
this.
No. Unions are
How
pseudo
are they?
action.
No, they're not.
Unions are so
pseudo action. We
action.
wouldn't have 5-day work week without unions.
Oh, fuck off. That's such bullshit.
How is that bullshit?
That's such complete horseshit, dude.
Nah.
Free market competition would get there way quicker.
Well, we still got there.
Yeah, but now you have to attend the union meetings, which you're not even, getting paid for.
No, the Japanese union meetings are very different. The unions in Japan don't even... Then the company like executives, they decide who becomes who joins the unions. Then they don't even represent the workers. Fucking... nuts. Anyway,
unions are like, I don't know, it's this idea of making like work where there is no work, of making problems where there is no problem, so that you can appear to be solving a problem appear to be working when really you're just pseudo acting. I think that's a lot. Maybe not. That's not 100% of it, but I think that's a lot of it.
I think unions are pretty solution oriented.
I don't know, man. It feels like it's the same with like social workers. I feel like. It's like people who want to pat themselves on the back for pseudo acting.
No. I mean, I don't. No. I actually disagree with that. I think most people that do social work's not fucking easy. Like,
I don't know, man.
Okay, no, I would agree with you if you said, you know, some person donating over like some Instagram like fucking charity drive to like give some money to an orphanage, like patting themselves on the back. Like, yeah, but like, you know, I have a friend who actually does this, like, you know, working with orphans and stuff, and it's like fucking horrible, like, work. Like, not playing with orphans, but like, you know, dealing with kids that have been abused, and like, you know, parents who are like, they could be like single mothers or something, or like people who are really in really tough situations, and like, that's hard.
Is he employed by a company or by like the local government?
I don't know. I think it's a private company.
The show, because
that's social work though, right? Technically.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I wouldn't really call it that. Because I mean, it's in the same category, but like.
I don't know if
no.
She works for.
But like all the. Okay, anecdotal experience incoming, but like, all the fucking social workers I've ever talked to are like. The embodiment of nothing doing bureaucrats who pretend that there are like pretend that they have a real job, but then, you know, when it comes to actually doing their job, trying to change something, they're so good at not progressing anything.
Yeah.
While like. And it just seems, and they're all like, yeah, hey man, it's cool, man, and it's, you know, they're all these like we're doing something good over here. I don't know. I don't mean to generalize everyone in that bracket, but I think there is like that kind of archetype.
Yeah, no, definitely. 100%. And I mean, if you think about the incentives that motivate, like, I don't know, I'm really like skeptical about, like, so in university we have like this free counselling thing, right? And like a few years ago I went to for maybe like 6 months or something, and like I couldn't help but just feel like just this person doesn't really kind of understand what I'm talking about, or didn't really like give a shit. She seemed like she was nice, and it was, you know, it helped somewhat, but like, you know, thinking about the incentives, like if I was in her position, I don't know if how much my like feeling of altruism would carry me through that.
Exactly right.
I think in some cases, like, there genuinely are people that like my friend, I genuinely think she is she wouldn't be doing it otherwise, but in some cases it's like, how are the checks and balances like happening here? You know,
which is if you're self-employed or at least privately employed, it's like, you know, the degree to which you have a job is to some degree proportional to whether you're actually helping people. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, we went on a tangent there.
Fuck unions!
Fuck unions. Okay. How did we get here?
So I was talking about... Shit, I shouldn't dox my girlfriend. Fuck. My girlfriend's experience with the union... Oh, just like bullshit, like work stuff that you have to tend to, that doesn't actually really do anything. Yeah. So like the union she works for it really like doesn't do much. Like they don't. My girlfriend had problems with the company before she joined the union. I was like, why don't you go and speak to the union? She was like, no, there's just no point. Just don't do anything. They don't do anything for me. But so talking about, you know, what would happen if you just said no to these things? And I do think in like the Japanese work environment, like you can do that, but like not without, you know, causing problems. Right. You know, so, do you want to have a good relationship with your colleagues, right?
Those are the two things I always hear. Is one is promotion chances. Like basically, if you don't attend the after work meetings, and if you're if you don't stay longer, even if you're not doing any work, right, you won't get promoted as likely. And I get the fear. I don't think on the whole it's a legitimate fear, but I get the fear because I don't think in a functioning company, any actual manager, or by extension the stockholders, putting pressure on the managers, would actually give a shit if you're doing meaningless social obligational tasks, as long as the job that you're performing is good and it's in some way superior to others, right? So let's say you're doing a really good job, you're making the company more profit than the other employees, but you never go to the whatever after work social meetings because you're just like, hey, you guys are cool, but I have my own family, so sorry. I don't think that would stop you from being promoted. In like maybe there might be exceptions, but I don't think on the whole that's a legitimate argument. And then the second one about your ningen kanke is what they say, right? Human relations to your other peers.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean that's like highly situational, firstly.
Yes.
Because you're not dealing with structures then as much as you're dealing with like individuals who all have very different temperaments and very different appreciations of like.
Exactly. And I think if you want to have a genuine relationship with any of your coworkers, you will have those relationships with them individually. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And it would be in spite of whether or not you go to these.
Exactly. relationship between you and A, you and B, you and C, you and D. But I think because people are afraid, or usually don't have those genuine individual relationships, they have a kind of pseudo group identity relationship of like, we're all nakama, we're all colleagues in this company, and therefore now it becomes meaningful that you attend these pointless meetings and whatever drinking parties, because you don't actually have a genuine relationship with any specific individual.
Okay.
So I think in a way, the argument that not participating in these extracurricular activities is like would hurt your ningen kanke is kind of an excuse for not actually having actual human relationship with these people. It's like saying I don't
right, okay.
I'm afraid, or I don't want to have actual individual relationships, so I need to at least appear like keep up the social front.
Yeah. I totally see what you're saying. Yeah, I actually kind of agree with you, I think. I had points. Fuck, where have they gone?
I think there's also like a fear of if you're the only one who's not there, everyone's gonna talk shit on you.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing.
Which also I think wouldn't happen if you had genuine relationships with individuals.
Yes, but I mean, maybe it's the case that like, okay. So firstly, one thing I wanted to get out of the way. I think, there is like a tendency to, I think compartmentalize is the right word, or like have relationship time in the workplace. It's like there has to be like a specific time, a specific area, a specific like, this feels very Japanese. It's like, okay, now it's talking time. Now it's friend time. Yeah. Like now it's like very much like put in these like little areas, these little spaces. So in a way, I think that is reflected in this thing you're talking about. I think, in reality, people do have individual relationships, and I know you weren't saying they don't, but it is funny because they are completely unrelated to these, group activities that people engage in. But I also think, what is happening is there is a conscious effort to try and create relationships rather than just letting them naturally occur, or letting them naturally occur as they would in the workplace, but then providing extra space for that to happen. If I were to play devil's advocate, I would say they were useful in that sense, because you get to part of the use of that is that you get to interact with obviously people that you get on well with, but obviously people that you don't know very well, or people that you don't get on well with, but you get to interact with them after the game is over. Yeah. After you take the work mask off and you don't have to play with them like that. You can talk to them on different terms. And so in a sense, like these, that strikes me as like the function of these sorts of things. Like that it helps facilitate those kinds of relationships. And there are times, I've gone out drinking with my bosses and stuff, or, like when we go out drinking with like our instructors, or our professors, then it's like, you see them in a different light, which is a good thing in some ways. Maybe not a bad thing. And I think the thing in Japan is like, it's just the feeling of choice, or the feeling that it's not something that people are doing because they necessarily want to, or they see value in it, like the value that I just talked about. Yeah. But rather they feel just coerced into doing it out of some arbitrary, like, hierarchy in the workplace, or some, tradition, something that their company always does.
There's also an interesting linguistic element to this, which is, in English, Bartleby saying "I would prefer not to" is a very polite kind of. Yeah. It's almost, he's almost not even declining. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's like he's kind of doing it in a charming way almost. Whereas in Japanese, if you were like, しない方が嬉しいですね. You're like, excuse me? Like, people would never say that. People would instead say something like, ちょっと忙しくて.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm so busy today.
Yeah.
Which is obviously just a lie.
Yes. Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Or then they would just be like, ちょっと.
Yeah.
Which is just like, how do you even translate? They're just like,
Yeah, it's just like, just being like,
I kind of like, maybe, I'm not, That's basically it, right? And the thing in Japan, like, you know, when we're learning Japanese, like, your teachers would just tell you, like, if you want to say you don't want to do something, just say, like, I don't know.
Don't decline outright.
Yeah.
I hate that so much.
But that's like that is the function of the language. I
really disagree with that a lot.
But it is, if you observe the day-to-day, like, the majority of experiences.
Yes.
That is how it goes.
Yes.
I'm not saying
but
that...
it's not... It hasn't always been that way. If you look at, like...
Yeah, of course.
If you look at Japanese 100 years ago, it wasn't that way.
Yeah.
And in fact, you know, you would probably be seen as kind of a... Like, if we're talking about novels, the guy who's like, would be more painted as like a... Like... Yeah... valueless kind of villain character, right?
But and even today, like, even in media today, like, characters that are like that aren't ideal. Like, it's funny, like, I'm not like, when you're a scholar of Japanese studies, you have to always preface any comment about anime with, I don't really watch anime, but but in like anime and like, you know, these like popular depictions of people in Japan, like, you know, there's always these decisive characters that are very, like, pretty honest about how they feel and very passionate about, like, what they think is right and wrong, that are always protagonists, always, like, the most popular characters. Not to say that those who are indecisive are evil, necessarily, but, you know, it's like...
But it remains... And this is where we get to kind of a Zizek Freudian thing. It remains a desire. As soon as it manifests in reality, there's quite some backlash. You would even see, like, there's this popular... It's not a Vocaloid thing. It's some... I think she's just a singer. Was Ado?
Yeah.
She was kind of very popular.
Ado.
Yeah. And she had this song where she's just basically, like... It's kind of like a rebellion against the system. It's just being, like... Like, it's you know, it's Japanese, so it's not like she swears that much.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like aggressive, like, don't, like, I reject your social order, like, all these like quite...
I think I've heard about the song, actually.
Yeah. And it got like a really it got popular online amongst young people, but it got a really negative backlash in the mainstream press.
Right.
And people would be like, you shouldn't disrespect your elders like that, and that kind of like...
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting as well. I had this is like kind of related. I had this epiphany recently. I was thinking of like, you know, I work at a radio station, and we play a lot of like... Oh, it's the battery.
The battery's good. Carry
on. There's one program where we play like hip hop from New York, and
really?
it's like a Japanese DJ from New York, and
cool.
Yeah, but like even the way it's presented, like they would never ever talk about what's going on with Kanye West right now, right?
Right, sure.
And like. Even if they play Japanese hip hop, all Japanese hip hop is kind of like, they'll go as far as to say like, I'm growing up on the streets of Tokyo, and it's like that kind of stuff. But they would never say like the big swear words or like advertise for killing the cops or doing drugs or like having a bunch of hookers or stuff like that.
A little bit of drugs, but it would be the light ones.
Yeah, it's like you're like, I'm kind of messing with Mariana a bit cheekily, woo. That's like to the extent of it, right?
And then I had one puff.
Yeah. But you can play a song the lyrics of which will be like the most vile lyrics ever in English. It's like, whatever, like shoot everyone, whatever, murder the children. I have all my hookers. I'm doing all these drugs. And, Japanese people, how they are with English, they don't understand anything. They're, it's very cultural. It's very, it's very good. But then, if a Japanese rapper...
Right.
If a Japanese rapper is like, I don't like the pressure you're putting on young people. They're like, I don't know if we can have this. Yeah. That's a bit controversial, isn't it?
But I feel like that's a lot of people's experiences with Japan as well. Like, almost like... one thing I find quite interesting is I think this is with K-pop as well. You get a lot of women from like Western Europe and America, and they have I haven't really quite thought this through, but like I feel like the K-pop thing, being like it's not traditional femininity, but like it's very, very conventional like ideas of like femininity and stuff like that. And in a way, I feel like the appeal is kind of an maybe unrecognized like desire for some kind of traditional femininity in a cultural context like in Western Europe, where it's much more progressive, that is not necessarily like that well recognized. Like I think like like when girls come to Japan and like they get the kimono and shit, and what they're doing is they're really like participating in a very, very traditional like this is a woman's role, like this is a woman's place, is like wearing a kimono, I know it's more celebratory than that, but like through a feminist lens, like it's very much, you could definitely see it like that, right?
You could. I wouldn't agree with it, but you could.
No, I'm not asking you if you agree with it. My point is that people who would otherwise agree with that idea, when you come to Japan, it's like you can sort of take the goggles off, or take, you don't have to think about these things this way because you're in Japan now.
Okay, fair enough.
And I think a lot of people have that experience. Like on the other way around, like people having that experience with Japan, in the same way that Japanese people can listen to hip hop and even listen to the lyrics, even translate the lyrics and like understand them, and still think of it as cool because it's not on it's not in your culture. It's like part of something else.
See, I generally don't believe that the part of translating the lyrics and understanding them happens here ever at all.
But say that it did.
Yeah, okay.
Because, the people still understand the message of hip hop, for example, like the subversive messages about hip hop and stuff, and like, but it's like, we kind of don't want that here. Like, it's like, does that mean there's like, going to be drugs outside the conveni? Like, I don't know if I want that. Like,
Right.
So yeah.
No, that's okay. We've taken quite a detour, but
we've taken a massive detour.
No, but it's just to illustrate that. I think in this idea of Bartleby, that the idea of language plays a huge role, and I don't think it easily translates across cultures. The kind of rejecting everything, not participating. Bartleby. He wouldn't work the same way in a different language, I think.
No.
And you could say, to bring it back to Japan, that we have here we go, Japanese studies major, let's go. We have the idea of hikikomori.
Yeah.
These people who shut themselves in and just play video games all day, or, don't have a job. It's, they call them NEET, as well, NEET, not employed in education or training.
That's different to hikikomori, but
yeah, it is different.
But
it's similar in the way that are these the Japanese Bartlebys, right?
Yeah.
Because they are quite silent. They're not actively rebelling against the system.
Yeah.
But they are kind of like withdrawing themselves, and it's not hedonism either.
No, it's not.
It is.
Yeah.
It is kind of a rejection of simple, like saying I don't want to, and then eventually your sphere of outside grows smaller and smaller until you basically starve in your own room.
Yeah. Literally. It's like, oh, my kettle doesn't boil anymore, so I can't make instant ramen, so I'm just gonna die.
Yeah.
I think that's actually like weirdly applicable here.
Right. So in this idea, we could say Bartleby is kind of a social idea. It's a little different from nihilism, but it basically is nihilism, I would say. And you know, again, what do we do about Bartleby? It's like
it's like social nihilism. I think is the way of saying it. It's not like nihilist about like not concerned with like what is the meaning of life.
Exactly.
But it's more like I'm disillusioned with these social systems that I can't escape from.
Okay, good point. It's very different from the kind of individual. I've thought this through and reached nihilism through philosophical.
Yeah, because I'm so
like
big-brained.
Debate. Yeah, it's very different from our last book that we talked about.
Yeah.
So how do we fix it? How do we fix the social nihilism of Bartleby? And do we need to?
You know, we could maybe imagine that Bartleby has a place somewhere.
He hasn't found his niche.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, yeah. But the question is, you know, what is the kind of work that he could do? Because, you know, we get this allusion to him working at the dead letter office, which is it sounds basically the same. You know, it's a similar menial job that doesn't, you know, he's not copying letters now, but he's sorting them so they can be destroyed. It's funny because it's, you know, in some ways like less alienating than some of the labor today. But it's because at least you're like going to an office and like you're dealing with real physical things.
Yeah.
And like you have to make some kind of decisions. You know, I have some friends that just literally like their job is just like a fucking spreadsheet and like Microsoft Teams, and they just sit at home or like in their fucking bed on their laptop, messaging people on Microsoft Teams, and then like changing some things in like some fucking spreadsheet.
Oh
like,
god,
it's literally their job, and I'm just like want to fucking kill myself.
It's like the translation company I occasionally work for.
Yeah.
Which is like the actual translators. I guess they do have some substance of work, but all the full-time employed people, their job is basically to coordinate the project. So they're literally like, you know, they send you like a manual for some completely like ridiculously useless machine, and they like translate this, and then like they send it to someone, and then someone like does the translation, and then they have to like check over it.
Yeah.
But since they don't really understand the language, it's just like them putting it into Google Translate and checking if it's kind of applicable. And then the worst one is like the comma check. So they just check if the commas are all the same and the periods are.
Oh god.
Like they go through like a whole manual, and they just see if every sentence has a period. That kind
That's fucking disgusting.
I know, right?
Do you do like the checking if the quotes are properly like, you know like quotes like face one or two directions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like the Bartleby like copying job in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, maybe you could argue that. Again, I don't know. It's hard because it's like I don't think we can do anything with Bartleby. Like I don't think that is like.
But is there an environment in which Bartleby could flourish? Let's say even without capitalism or whatever.
I don't
like in nature.
I find it really hard to just imagine him as not being like that. But I don't think the story is like, you know, if Bartleby is a human who feels this certain way, how do we change these things to make this better for him? I'm not sure if like you get anywhere.
No.
I find it hard to think about it in those terms, at least. Do you have any ideas?
No. No. Not at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Wrap up thoughts. What takeaways?
Well, before we do that, let's.
Yeah.
Should we play that game?
Oh, you want to play? Yeah.
So as with the underground man, we did the
Dostoevsky, Notes from the Underground.
Yeah, what would the underground man do? What would no? This is so stupid.
We want to play. What would Bartleby do? Okay, go ahead. Give me a scenario. I'll be Bartleby. Look, this is how this works. Okay. You give the scenario, and I'll be Bartleby. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Paint your nails.
I would prefer not to.
Okay, that was good. Yeah, I think that was probably what you do.
Yeah, that's probably what you do. Yeah.
What else? Let's say go to a disco.
I would prefer not to.
That was also quite good.
Quite deep, very deep insight.
Yeah. Vote in an upcoming election.
I would prefer not to.
Okay. So most people.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've run the joke today.
Yeah. Just killed our entire audience. So yeah, a final takeaways. Yeah, that's a good question. I think.
Honestly, for me, it's kind of like I tend to have these like antithetical, almost like Nietzschean opposite takeaways from stories recently, but it's like, yeah, maybe you can get away with a lot of shit if you just say I would prefer not to.
Yeah.
And it's like, like yeah, if my boss asked me to do some like thing that's not really relevant to my job, maybe I should just be like I would prefer not to.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, oh, I'm busy, or I don't know, or like that kind of shit. Because I think every time you basically, it was a lie, right?
Yeah.
It makes yourself weaker,
Yeah, and I think on top of that, I think the other takeaway, which complements this, is to be resolute about the ways that you deal with that kind of lack of cooperation. If you're going to be the narrator, if you want to be charitable, but don't have any resentment about that. If you want to be charitable, like stick with that, but if you really think about it and you're like, okay, this really annoys me, or like this is completely unworkable, actually try and do something about that. And I don't even think the means of doing it is that important. Like, I think the way that the way that the narrator goes around it, he basically, does this like indirect bureaucratic thing of like, I'm going to help you get another job, or I'm going to move the office. I think with Bartleby, it wouldn't matter how we dealt with it.
But I also think
in a way, like, just whatever it needs to do, if you whatever you need to do, just do that. But if we get to a point where the people who don't want to do something will just say, no, I don't want to do it, and the people who receive that answer will be able to deal with that in a more resolute way, then that makes kind of everything better for everyone. Because it's like, okay, if you're really not moving with it, then I have to find a way of dealing with that, and that might be punishing you, or it might be just taking that burden, but it's because you've been honest with me and said you don't want to do it, and that's kind of good, I guess, in a way, having a ward like that, where not being afraid of being kind of deadly honest about how you feel about something. Not even how you feel about it, but just being deadly honest about not wanting to do something. Yeah,
I think it's very freeing, probably, in a way that,
Well, it's funny with, like, I think we have this experience with Japanese, like, when you speaking a new language, you kind of have these, you make so many mistakes all the time. You become so used to making mistakes that you're kind of almost liberated in a way to kind of not say what you want exactly, but like, there have been times in Japan where I've kind of been in a Bartleby situation. I've just been like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's almost like you're playing a video game or something when you're doing it. You're like, is this really happening? Like, And, you know, it is weirdly freeing. It's a little bit alienating, though, I think, as well, actually. Because you know that a lot of people don't really know how to deal with that. And, you know, if that were to happen to me as well, I'm not sure how I would, depending on the situation, you know, if I was, like, managing someone and they said that to me, I'm not really sure how I would deal with it. Yeah.
All right.
Any more closing thoughts?
Not really. I think we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Next time.
Yeah.
We're talking about. Are we doing the thesis thing, or are we
it might be coming? I think we'd probably be doing. We'll see. We've got a couple of things in the works at the moment.
Yeah.
Phil is going away in 2 weeks.
I'm going to the US. Yeah. So the next book, let's just say the next book we'll tackle is Roadside Picnic.
Yes, this is a book that inspired the movie Stalker, which is a amazing movie, which we will probably watch together. Tarkovsky movie, and so this book is it's a Russian science fiction novel from the 1970s, and it's gonna be banging. Really looking forward to it. Yeah. We have
some time. Read along with us.
Yeah. It'll be out in the next 2 weeks. We have obviously an email as well, so bookboyspod@gmail.com. If you have any comments or
questions, suggestions, let us know.
We've also got like a little question in the Spotify thing as well. I think you can like submit like comments or like things. Yeah, you'll see it.
Cool.
All right. Thank you for tuning in.
Would you like to end the podcast?
Me? I would prefer not to.
Boys.